all my travels, I've realized an island is only as big as its heart. And in my time in Barbados, I've seen the heart of the island, even through the people, through the food, even through the rum. The way we travel has completely changed, but it's the best feeling to know that peace of mind is right within our reach. But I can tell you, my experience here has been so seamless. The guy who's my taxi driver, his name is Big Apple. He has true Bayesian spirit. He's welcomed me into this island, and he's given me the most authentic experience. When it comes to Bayesian food, I am obsessed with breadfruit cuckoo.
This has no business tasting this good.
So I got to try breadfruit cuckoo for the first time on Peg Farm. I had a really good time going to check out the rum tours. If you are a fan of rum punch or just rum cocktails in general, you're going to have a really good time on that tour. And Barbados, if you do not know, has incredible water. They've got some amazing underwater shipwrecks. The turtles here are beautiful and they literally are so friendly. This island has big stories to tell and big moments for you to capture. So when you're ready to reimagine the way you explore, Barbados is open, and so is its heart.
Come from a place, we accept every single race. Paradise is we name. Come over and you will fall in love. I should stay, have a special time of the year where we just get away. Most beautiful display. We'll search a million places, travel a million miles to find a vibe like this and have a time like this. You may have a million problems, need some place to ease your mind. Welcome to my place, oh yeah. With arms wide open. This place here is the sweetest place. My culture, you can eat arms wide open. Promise you'll never be the same. Show you how we done celebrate. Jump all around us, how we done. Let all around us, how we done. All on the ground, that's how we done.
Barbados is a beautiful island in the Caribbean that represents many things for many people. It is the perfect holiday getaway, a foodie paradise, the birthplace of rum, and the home of Rihanna. Welcome to Barbados.
Hi, I'm Cherie, and I'm so excited that Tinder Press in the UK will be publishing my first novel, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House is about a woman called Lala who works as a hair braider on the beach in Barbados, and it's about this one summer in 1984 when her life just changes in these really fundamental ways. It's about a murder that takes place on the beach on the same night that her daughter is born, her first child, and it's about how these two events, the murder and the birth of her baby, impact Lala's life in some really amazing ways. It's also a bit of a love story. There's a very touching, I think, love story between Lala and one of the characters in the book called Tone. As with most of my writing, Lala's voice just came to me. It wasn't a case of seeing something that made me think I want to write this book about Lala. It was a voice in my head. I heard a few lines from the book, and the process of writing it was a lot about trying to get to know that voice and that character a lot better. Now, having said that, I did sort of coming to an awareness of myself in the 80s. So there are lots of things about the 80s that I found interesting and inspiring, and they feature a lot in the book. My absolute favorite part of the book is chapter 25, and that's the scene when Lala and her lover Tone explore the tunnels. So there are these underground tunnels in Barbados that feature in the book. And Lala starts the chapter by asking, how do you learn to love a man? And by the end of the chapter, she gets the answer. But what happens in between is really exciting. So Barbados is the most easterly of the Caribbean islands. It's 166 square miles, and our national dish is cuckoo and flying fish. Now, our economy depends a lot on tourism, and that's one of the things that is explored quite a bit in the book, because although we are this picture perfect paradise that you see on the postcards and everybody wants to visit, the book is very much about how the people who actually live in Barbados have lots of challenges like anybody anywhere else, and it's about how these particular characters that we meet work through those challenges in a way that's helpful to everybody else. Thanks so much for all your efforts in bringing Lala's story to the world. And please, absolutely, if there's anything I can do to help you, just feel free to let me know. Thanks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Happy National Heroes Day, and welcome to Sweeping with the One-Armed Sister, presented to you by the Mission of Barbados in North America. My name is Reeva Goodman, and I have the pleasure of being your moderator for tonight. This evening, we're going to chat with Cherie Jones, and we'll get to know more about the incredible author and hear a few readings from her debut novel, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. Now, we did say that Cherie will be engaging with the diaspora and answering your questions. So please take some time, get your questions in early. We have the Q&A there at the bottom, and I will do my very best to ensure that Cherie answers all of your questions during our Q&A portion of the night. Now, I want to remind you that this is a live event. Technical issues do arise. So if you should experience any delays or technical issues, please do bear with us. And I also want to remind you that the opinions expressed by myself as the host, the author, and the audience during this evening's discussion are our own personal views and do not necessarily reflect the official position of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade, or reflect Barbados, its mission, do not reflect the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Foreign Trade of Barbados, or its mission in North America. Before we get to Cherie, please allow me to welcome Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Donna Ford. Oh, Donna, we're gonna need you to go off mute there.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Reeva. My views represent the views of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and it is a pleasure to join with colleagues from Barbados' diplomatic missions in the United States, in Washington, DC, New York, and Miami, as well as our missions in Canada, the High Commission to Canada, and the Consulate General at Toronto, to welcome and to thank you, Reeva, and Cherie, and our audience this afternoon for joining with us to welcome Barbadian author Cherie Jones. Cherie, thanks to you for taking time out of your increasingly busy schedule to share with us your views on your newest novel, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. We are happy to spend this time with Cherie and to expose our diaspora and friends of Barbados and those Barbadians joining with us from Barbados to share Barbados's literary talent and also to give you a taste of home. Certainly from the videos you would have seen, I felt that I wanted to go to Barbados. And the government of Barbados welcomes every opportunity to engage with the diaspora and friends of the diaspora. And thankfully, the technology and the increased use of the digital platforms for our engagements is allowing all 5 of our North American missions to jointly host Cherie in one sitting. And through this evening's engagement by cultural diplomacy, we are offering you a taste of home and a glimpse of Barbadian culture through the uniquely Barbadian personalities set in the context of Cherie's novel. And in this way, we are making Barbados equally accessible to all Barbadians, to those who are familiar with Barbados, and those who may not yet know Barbados, but who in time when you know Barbados will come to recognize us and our island from some of the personalities with whom you become acquainted from the various themes and scenarios in the novel. Cherie and Reeva will delve deeper into the details of the novel, which, as Cherie pointed out in the opening comments, explore some of the realities of class and race and other societal issues. And it is the universality of these themes and Cherie's compelling storytelling that have brought her and her novel into prominence and have garnered her excellent reviews indeed, in The Guardian, in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Los Angeles Times, and has helped her to make Oprah's list of the best 20 books for February 21, as well as the Barnes & Noble Discover pick for February 21. And many of you would also, like myself, had the opportunity to see Cherie appear on Good Morning America. So without extending further, I'd like to welcome you again, Cherie and Reeva. And I wish you continued success, and I hope that your efforts will serve as encouragement to other Barbadian and Caribbean writers in the diaspora and at home. Barbados has always been a country that punches above its weight. And Cherie, you are another shining example that we can compete with the best. And it is fortuitous that today's event takes place on our National Heroes Day, because for Barbados and Barbadians, our national heroes represent global excellence, courage, leadership, and an unquenchable thirst for social justice. And these are the same ideals that converge in how the one-armed sister sweeps her house. So let me end by commending my colleagues in our North American missions for their initiative and timeless efforts in bringing us all together this evening, and for acknowledging Cherie and her efforts with her novel as a true credit to our nation. Thank you.
Thank you, DPS. You know, you mentioned about those videos, and I was dancing a little bit, and I was missing home for sure. I'm here in Toronto with y'all, and I was definitely missing home for sure. But you know, we're here. We get to take advantage of technology and come together. So thank you so much, DPS. Now, I know y'all don't want to hear me talk too much. We came to talk to Cherie. So please allow me to introduce attorney, mother, and author, Cherie Jones.
Hello, Reeva. Good evening, DPS. Thanks so much to the Missions of North America for hosting this event. It really is an honor to be asked to be here. And thanks to everybody who has joined through the technology and who has demonstrated an interest in my novel, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House. I'm really excited to be here today to talk to you a little bit about it and to take your questions. So thanks very much to everybody for having me. It really is a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Cherie. So as the DPS mentioned, we all got to possibly see you on that Good Morning America interview. I know that when I watched it, I was like, yes, Bajan women rock. So I was so excited. And you really made a name for yourself as a Bajan author, and you're giving Barbados this added recognition, all while promoting your book. But you know, people want to know, like, who is Cherie? Attorney by day, mom by night, and now an author with a debut novel that's landed you on the Good Morning America Book Club pick for February. Like, who is Cherie?
Well, I'd say first of all that Cherie is a creative person, a passionate person. I like to laugh. I like to enjoy myself. I'm very much into not only my writing, I'm passionate about my writing, but I also enjoy photography, fine art.
textile design. I think apart from everything else that I do and I try to accomplish, despite all of the objectives and goals that I have for myself, I think the greatest for me is still raising my children. So I think that is still my biggest achievement to date, managing to get them to the stage that they are at this point in time. So in a nutshell, that's who I am.
So you said you know your children is one of the biggest things for you. How many children do you have, Cherie?
So I am a mom of 4. My oldest child, a son, is 24. And my youngest is a 5-year-old girl. So I have 2 boys and 2 girls. And yeah, that's it. That's how many kids.
Oh, lovely. So you've got a wide range there. So, I mean, how do you juggle all of that? I mean, especially, you know, you have the little one as well. How are you juggling all of this?
So the first thing I would say is I think I accepted a little while ago now that I'm never going to be able to balance everything. You know, trying to keep so many balls in the air means that invariably something falls at some point. And I think I've made my peace with that. So that helps a lot. Other than that, you know, trying to be really, really good with my time management. So trying to put all the different things that I need to do, you know, within specific time slots and you know, and comply with that. But it doesn't always happen that way. And I think I've learned to accept that I'm human and I do sometimes drop the ball and, you know, life goes on. I do the best I can at any given point in time. But yeah, it's hard.
I could only imagine. Now, tell us how, you know, your everyday life, you know, as an attorney, as a mom, how does that impact your writing?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think I was a writer long before I was an attorney. But I do think perhaps that my research skills and I think my ability to, you know, really interrogate a storyline and try to better understand characters and their motivation, I think some of that was honed from my legal practice and my legal training. So I do think perhaps in that regard, you know, law does influence my writing. So yes, that's what I'd say.
All right. So now I think many people who have read the book and those who have not, we want to know, what is the myth of the one-armed sister?
So, you know, in Barbados and in many other islands of the Caribbean, we have this tradition of telling, especially children, we'll tell them stories to kind of scare them into doing the right thing. So, you know, if you're not supposed to go outside at a particular time of the night because maybe the grease man can get you or some other, you know, there's some other scary monster just lurking outside. And basically the myth of the one-armed sister that appears at the beginning of the novel is made up. And it is something that I came up with. It represents, I think, how we try to scare women, especially young women, away from particular choices or behaviors, you know, by telling these scary stories. And I think the character in the novel who tells the story is an older woman. She is the Wilma, the grandmother of the protagonist, Lala. And you know, she tells her this story to kind of scare her away from these tunnels that appear in the novel. And also, you know, we have similar tunnels in Barbados in real life. So she tells her this myth to kind of scare her away from exploring the tunnels. And Lala, being the strong-headed Bajan girl that she is, you know, is a little bit obstinate and kind of refuses to take the story as it's given to her. But yeah, it's a made up story, but it's based on our tradition of telling these types of stories to scare, especially children, away from choices we don't want them to make.
You know, it's so funny. Like I said, I'm in Toronto, but of course, my parents born and raised in Barbados, and I definitely grew up with that Bayesian influence, and I know about those stories. I definitely know them, and I don't know if I'm sad to say or I'm proud to say that I tell my daughter some of the same ones as well. So that's how it goes. But,
we are. Yeah.
But with that, I would like to get into our first reading. I think you have a reading ready for us.
Yes, I do. So I'm going to read from the, and this is the part of the novel when Wilma tells Lala this story of the one-armed sister in the hopes of encouraging her to stay indoors at night and not to walk around, because Wilma has come back from visiting ours at the hospital and found Lala not at home. So they have a bit of a confrontation, and Wilma tells Lala the story of the one-armed sister. So I'm just going to read an extract from there. The mother tell them, but the little girl with the good sense listen, and the one that don't have any get more curious than ever. This sister question her mother, wonder what in the tunnel that's so sweet, she warning her away from it. Because this good-for-nothing girl already developing a taste for things that her mother tell her not to have. This slap from she born, force-ripe sister, already thinking that some bad things were real sweet. And if something's so sweet, it can be evil. This sister thinking to herself, it not that dark, it not that spooky. What's the use of a tunnel if you don't get to see where it leads? It's just this kind of tunnel that this sister decides she must explore, says Wilma. So she ups herself one evening when her mother was taking tea with the doctor wife. It was important matters they was talking, says Wilma, because the vicar's wife was a good mother, not one to leave her children alone even for a few seconds. But a few seconds is all the devil needs. Pretty soon, the vicar's wife hears screaming so sharp, it shaked the teapot on the table with the tea. The vicar's wife and the doctor wife run out and see the good sister holding on to the other for dear life, and something they can't quite see, pulling the stupid one by her other arm back into that tunnel. Well, the vicar wife and the doctor wife and the yard boy all grab on to the good sister, and they're pulling her, and she pulling the bad sister away from the thing in the tunnel. And, says Wilma, maybe it's only because her husband is the priest and a man of prayer that they get that stupid sister out. But that monster in the tunnel take her arm from her. Sure as day, when they rescue that sister, there's a bleeding stump where her arm used to be. That left arm ending in a knot just above what used to be her elbow. She survived, of course, says Wilma. The wicked often do. But she got a stump to remind her what stupid get her. Sure enough, the mother get the yard boy to seal up that tunnel quick after that. But the arm already in there. Curiosity killed the cat, says Wilma. Don't make yourself stupid like the one-armed sister. There is something about this story that angers Lala. Perhaps the fact that Wilma expects her at 13 years old to believe it. And none of them went back to find, wonders Lala, not even the yard boy? Yard boy know he limitations, says Wilma. Yard boy the match for a monster. She has mistaken Lala's silence as the proof of a scaring, just the kind to keep her out of the type of trouble that long walks at night can bring. So she picking up her hat and her bag and her belt and getting ready to go to her sewing room, where more work is waiting. I bet if it was the other way around, if the good sister was the one in that tunnel, the other one would have gone after that arm and found it for her, says Lala. I bet she would have. The good sister not so stupid to go in the first place, says Wilma, and her eyes flashing, and she thinking that maybe she should have just mustered the energy and given Lala a warm dose of licks instead. Well, I bet it not so bad having one arm, says Lala. She could still do things like everybody else. She could still get a husband and some children and a house. Stupid girl, says Wilma. How's she gonna sweep it?
I love it. Wow. So it's no wonder that this book has been described as unforgettable, devastatingly good, hard-hitting and unflinching, transporting, ambitious, poetic, and layered with the rich voices of its many stunning characters. Just a few. So, you know, Cherie, the book talks about some really heavy topics, right? You know, there's some topics about abusive relationships, domestic violence, sexual assault. I mean, how did you get through writing about these topics?
I actually found it really hard to write this story for a lot of reasons. One of which is being a survivor of domestic violence myself. I actually found it really, really wrenching, it was just heartbreaking at various points in time. And I found that over a long period of time, I kind of had to put it down and come back to it. And sometimes I put it down for weeks, even months at a time. So it really was very difficult to write, but it was also a really healing process for me, in that I found it really empowering just to be able to make certain creative choices about how I wrote it. So, for example, in terms of how I chose to depict the violent scenes in the book, and being able to make a conscious choice that the victims of violence in this particular story weren't victimized no gratuitous violence, and it wasn't just gore for gore's sake. In terms of how I wrote those episodes, I found that really very empowering, but it was difficult to write. And when these characters live in my head for the length of time that they did, you start to empathize with them. They're very real to me. So, it's difficult to have bad things happen to characters that you've grown to know and love. So yes, it was a difficult exercise, but at the end of the day, I think I did write the story that I was meant to write. So
you said you had to put it down at some points in time. How long did it take you to write the book in its entirety?
Well, that's the thing. That's something interesting, because I think sometimes when people see the book and they see that it's received, a warm reception, people tend to think, well, maybe I've never heard of Cherie Jones before. I've never heard of anything else from her. So, I think it definitely wasn't for this book, Reeva. I started this book, I actually started it as a short story. This started when I was living and working in the UK in 2008. Oh. So it started as a short story then, and I finished it in early 2018. So when I tell you it's over a span of 10 years, I think I probably really started to make it into a novel about 2015. But the seed of this story was there, and I'd started working on it since 2008. So it was a pretty long time.
So You said you started off as a short story. At what point did it evolve into this beast of a novel that it is now?
I think a number of things started to happen. So when I first started the short story, I came home, I started to write it. It was very compelling. I wrote this scene when Lala and Aiden tussle over baby. And, those of us who read it know how that ends. But that wasn't enough. I was asking questions, how did Lala find herself in these circumstances? What type of man is Aiden? Who would do this? And, and other things started to happen in order for me to be able to demonstrate how Lala had come to be in those circumstances. It became important to tell the stories of her mother and her grandmother, for example. So this short story just started to, it was no longer short after a while. It was just like this really unwieldy, piece of work. And finally, I think in about 2015, I realized, no, this needs to be a novel. I need that word space to be able to develop the characters. and develop this storyline in the way that I wanted. So yes, it was probably about 2015 that I realized it would be a novel, and probably around that same time, 2014, 2015, that Tone's character came to me, and he was included because he actually wasn't in the novel up to that point. He wasn't in the story.
And he plays a big part in the story, right?
Exactly, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Nothing before its time, because I might have thought I had a finished short story before that period, but clearly I didn't. As time went on and it started to expand and I started to develop it and work on it more, I recognized it needed to be a novel and I needed to put some other characters in there. So that's how that happened.
Oh. So I feel like as you're speaking here, I'm noticing that we're getting some Q&A coming in here. We're getting some questions coming in here. And for those of you that have questions, please remember at the very bottom of your screen, you should see maybe about the middle there, it says Q&A. So make sure that you type in your questions there and we will get to them. But as you're speaking and we're talking about, some of the topics of the book, a really good question that we got in here is, what has been the reception by men to the novel?
So actually the reception from men has been interesting. Now, I've only had feedback from a few males. When I think about the number of males in the total number of people who've reached out to me or whose reviews I've read talking about the book, the percentage of males has actually been quite small. So I'll start off by saying that. But of the men that I've spoken to, I think I'd say the minority, unfortunately, really appreciated it. I did have a few men say, this is just too much. Like, so much stuff happens. It's too much tragedy. I can't take it on. I had that, and I found that that's been a feature with, some of the male reviewers, especially, although females have said that as well. But there have been some men. I think the person who reviewed it for the Washington Post was a male, and that was one of the best reviews that I've had. I mean, it was just glowing. So, it's the reception of men has been mixed. But I would have to say, of the men whose reviews I've read or who reached out to me, I think quite a few of them thought it was, it was quite overwhelming.
I see. Now, another question we got here is, which character in the novel resonates with you the most?
Resonates with me. I wonder what specifically is meant by resonates. I definitely have a favorite character. My favorite character is Tone. I love Tone, and it's so. It's so fascinating to me because I met him quite late. I sometimes say that the characters that talk to me a lot don't always tell the truth. And, when I first kind of understood there was something between Lala and Tone, I was just like anybody on the beach. I kind of was wondering, well, what's going on between the two of them? Like, what is that about? And that only became clear after a little while. But so Tone is my favorite character because he's been through so much, and he's suffered quite a lot, and he still is resilient. He's kind, he is loving, he's supportive to Lala. I just love Tone's character as a person. I just think he's a beautiful person. Now, in terms of resonating with me, I think I do find some resonance in characters in the novel, in the sense that whether it's for me personally or it's women in my family or friends that I have, I do feel that a lot of their experiences are experiences that I can identify with to a greater or lesser extent. So yeah, that's what I would say. Tone is my favorite character, but I think there are bits in all the women that possibly I recognize in myself and in women around me.
Okay. So what about the reception that you've received in Barbados? So, I mean, overseas, here in Toronto in the States, it's really been making a lot of noise. You've been getting a lot of traction with it. How have you found it's been received in Barbados?
So in Barbados, people say home drums beat first. And one of the interesting things to me was that, it was slow to catch on in Barbados. That's what I'd say. I think people just didn't really know about it. But once it caught on, the response has been overwhelmingly good. I mean, people have been reaching out to me on Instagram and Facebook and just saying, I read your novel and it's so good. I really enjoyed it. And people have said to me, how are Barbadians taking this? Are they like kind of thinking, well, she washing the dirty linen in public, dirty laundry in public? I had somebody actually ask me that, do people kind of look at you like, wait, what you telling this story? But it hasn't been that at all. People have there's been an overwhelming outpouring of love and support from Bajans. And I'm really thankful for that, because for me, it was really important that this particular story, set as it is in Barbados about Bajans, be appreciated by Bajans. So it's wonderful to have other people around the world like it or engage with it or whatever. But I think it means just that much more that people at home actually appreciate the story. So that's been wonderful.
So, as you did your reading just now, of course, you're reading it in with the Bajan accent, or, in Bajan dialect. But did you hear anything about it being maybe difficult to understand for non-Bajans? Because, for myself, let's be quite honest, when I'm at work, I speak very properly and you don't hear any Bajan accent. But if I'm reading this, I'm going to definitely read it with an accent, right? So what has been the perception with that?
Yeah, so... okay, so this novel is unapologetically Bajan in its focus. It is a story about Bajan people, a certain part of our population, and therefore when they speak, I've tried to how they actually speak authentically. There's Bajan food in there, Bajan places, things that happen in Barbados. But yes, I didn't have pushback so much as curiosity. I remember this one time when I was going through a round of edits, and my editor sent me back the manuscript with line by line notes, and I had said something like, what started the Federation was that, first of all, that the boat was too small. And next to Federation, there was this little editorial note like, is this what you really mean to say? Like, what does this mean? So, I think I said, well, it means chaos. And I was trying to explain the context. I had another note for somebody getting barred on a bicycle. I had another note for cheese paste. And I thought cheese paste was pretty international. Maybe that's a Bajan or Caribbean thing, but it's so much a part of, who we are that, even the question. But thankfully, there was curiosity, but there wasn't pushback. There was no suggestion that I had to take things out or make it more palatable or more understandable, not from my editors, not from my agent. And I'm so thankful for that, because that was really important to me in the context of this story, just to be able to tell it authentically, tell it in the way that I felt it needed to be told. So there was curiosity there. I remember studying in the UK some years ago and being part of a writers group where I was the only person from the Caribbean. I was the only person of color. And I kind of felt like this big sense of responsibility when I had to bring work to the group for critique, that I brought something that was based in the Caribbean, and it was about Caribbean Bajan people, it had to be done, and there had to be dialect and so on. It's funny when you're away from home, how home just becomes like, it's almost like it just goes into sharp relief, and there's this strong sense of where I was from in that group, in that context. And I did this short story based on at a rum shop, characters at a rum shop, and submitted it to class. And I will never forget, one of my colleagues in the class said to me when I was finished reading my extract, you know, you need to have a glossary. Like, I don't understand that. Like, I don't know what you're talking about in these particular parts. And that, my lecturer was actually really good, because he kind of said, you know, we had a discussion then about what that really meant and how that emphasized this whole sense of being other than the mainstream or other than what was correct, because you almost had to translate it so that it would fit what was acceptable. And my lecturer was like, you know, not at all. That's not something that I want. And I was so grateful for that. It kind of underscored then how I felt about it. And that's been my response since then. I'm not saying that as a Bajan writer, I'm always going to be writing a story about characters who speak dialect or, you know, things that are particularly Bajan. That might not be the story or might not serve every story that I write. But when it does, it's gonna be there. That's my lens. That's where I'm from. That's how I see the world. My themes might be universal, but my viewpoint is mine, and it is no less valid because it originates in Barbados. So, you know, if you read about pudding and sauce in a book and you don't know what it is, I think you could kind of gather that something that people eat, and Google is always there, and, you know, Wikipedia or whatever else, Urban Dictionary, whatever you gotta use is there, you know? So I made no apologies for that, but thankfully, I have some excellent editors, and my agent is also very supportive. So there was no pushback, but yes, there was kind of curiosity, like, what do you really mean by this? And I had to explain, so. Yeah. Well,
I mean, if you're a Bajan, and I think even if you're a West Indian in general, if you know, right? Like,
yes, yeah. But I just resent. Resent is a strong word, but I just don't like the suggestion that just because I'm writing from this perspective, I am not as valid. This whole thing about, you know, writing from the margin. As far as I'm concerned, I am writing from the center of who I am. And, you know, people need to come into my space and understand from my perspective. I actually think that's a gift when I read authors from other jurisdictions, other parts of the world and so on. It's a privilege to be able to see the world through different eyes, you know? So I just expect that same willingness to get into my story as I want to tell it.
So I'm going to go to one more question that came in before we get to our next reading, because I thought this one was really good. So it came in from an anonymous attendee, and it says, "The story is so compelling. I listened to the audiobook version, but I love the way you've read it. I was sorry to reach to the end and wondered if there'd be another story about Lala's journey."
So, you know, a few people have asked that, and the way that I'm inspired to write a story, I feel as if I receive these stories. Mm-hmm. That's the best way I can put it. I feel as if a story is given to me, apply the best of my writing ability and skill and whatever talent I may have to polishing that story and allowing it to be fully realized. So having said that, no sequel has come to me. No character from a sequel has come to me up to this point in time and said, wait, you know what happened to Lala? And started. Nobody said that. I haven't heard anybody in my head. So the short answer to that, because I know I could talk sometimes, but the short answer to that is no. At this point in time, there are no plans for a sequel. I'm not ruling it out. Maybe some character will come to me from Lala's future and I will go into something. But as it is right now, unfortunately not. I've gone on to other projects.
Okay, we'll get into more of that. We'll get into more of that later. So I think the answer for this is not yet. We'll see what happens. To be continued.
I don't want to make any promises. I don't want to say not yet, and then people expect, well, sometime in the future, you know. But as it is right now, I don't have any plans to. But you never know what will happen.
Okay, all right. So we're gonna get into another reading, Cherie. Go ahead, please.
All right. So I'm not gonna give. I hope it's not a. Hope it's not a spoiler, but. So for those of us who haven't read the stories yet, this is the part of the story where a baby has died. Let me put it that way. A baby has died, and the baby's grandmother has come to find the baby's mom and the baby's body on the beach. So this is after the baby has been found, and this is a scene that takes place on the beach afterwards. So Lala, 17th August, 1984. Baby looks peaceful when they hand her to her mother. She looks like she's just asleep, like she will wake up with the right whisper of her name, the right rub of her cheek, the right kiss on her forehead. But her cheeks are swollen, cold, and clammy. Her chest does not move up and down, and she does not respond to Lala's passionate kisses on her forehead. Lala takes her baby from Tone's outstretched arms and is shocked to find her floppy, like the best kind of doll, one of the ones whose limbs do not resist embraces, whose arms can be made to hug you back. Baby is neither stiff nor unyielding, not the way she'd imagined she would be. She's the same soft she was 2 hours before. Lala had woken her up to feed her and realized that she was not moving. Lala wraps baby more securely in the blanket that shrouds her and hugs her close and pushes through the silent throng and goes to sit with baby in a little wooden boat made black by the battering of salt and water and wind. She sits herself down on the rain-soaked wood and rocks her dead baby and pats her gently and looks at her and looks at the sea. Wilma did not come when baby was born, when the nurse had called to tell her that Lala had just delivered her great-granddaughter. She had not provided an hour or two's respite when baby had squalled incessantly those first few days and Lala was exhausted. She was not a source of guidance on how to help baby latch on to Lala's breast when baby kept turning her head from her own mother's milk. Wilma had not passed on to Lala the woman's wisdom that she herself had been gifted. What bush to burn to keep duppies away from the new soul? What sound to open above baby's head in her cradle to ensure that the devil did not take her? What plant to bruise and soak in water she could sit in to soothe her stitched together parts? Wilma had not come then, but Wilma comes now when she hears that her great-granddaughter is dead. Word travels fast in a small village, and she is sliding her small feet into a pair of Chinese slippers within half an hour of hearing that baby has been found. She comes, and the crowd outside parts to the vision of Lala sitting still in that little black boat, staring at the sunrise, holding her dead baby, with the sea crashing and foaming in grief in the background. Wilma sits next to Lala. She puts her arms around her. She sobs. She puts her palm on baby's forehead to see whether there might still be warmth there, whether perhaps this is all a big mistake. I'm sorry, Sella, she says to Lala. I'm real sorry. That's the end of the extra.
Wow. I mean, you gotta just take a minute and take that in, right? So the chat has been going on, the question and answers, the questions have been coming in. One of the questions that's been asked, and I think it's almost based on the question you answered before we got into the reading, and it's, how do you quiet the characters in your head after the story is done?
That is an excellent question. That's a really good question. Now, the thing is that I don't usually have to quiet the characters, because when they're done with miss me. So it's like, I have 3 stages to my writing process. And the first stage is really when I'm receiving this story and I'm listening to the characters in my head. I'm asking questions and I'm just trying to get everything down. So my characters will talk to me, or I'll see scenes played out and I'll try to figure out what the real story is behind what I'm being told or what I'm seeing. But then there's usually a point at which the characters just stop talking to me. They've told me their side of the story, and that's it. What I do after that is my business, as we would say. So I then go into the second stage, which is really crafting the story and deciding what techniques to use, what creative techniques, what the real story is, and just trying to polish that and present that as best I can. And then the last stage is, pretty ruthless. That's the editing stage. And if there are any characters left at that point that don't serve this story, don't really help to bring out what the story really is, that's when, they get killed. So, I think probably some of the characters figure, well, let me just tell her what we gotta tell her and get out of here, because if not, she might end up killing us anyway. So yeah, so usually it's not a matter of getting characters out of my head afterwards, because there's a point at which, there's nothing more that they have for me. I've received what I've received, and it's now my turn to work. There is one character I keep saying, this really brash American tourist who's getting Lala to braid her hair. And she was just, she was badass as far as I was concerned. I really, really got into this character. I really liked her. But she had to be cut because she didn't serve the story. So I think she's still there. I keep saying she's in a file on my computer. She's in a Word file and she's still trying to talk. So she might come out, in something else. But generally my characters leave me at a certain point in the process, and it's just me after that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
They serve their purpose and then you're done with them. Yeah. So the next question I have here, can you explain how you came up with the title of the book? We've discussed the title in our book club, and how you could have possibly derived at that title.
So the ending of the extract from the myth that I read earlier, Wilma, when Lala refuses to accept the guidance that Wilma is trying to give her in the form of this story of the one-armed sister, and how she doesn't listen to her mother, goes into this tunnel and gets her arm bitten off by a monster, essentially. So when Lala does not accept the wisdom tale, she and Wilma starts to get a little upset and so on. And Lala says, well, even if she doesn't have an arm, she could still get a husband. She could still get a couple kids. She could still get a house. And Wilma says, stupid girl, how is she going to sweep it? Now, to me, that title has, and that question has a number of different layers. So it's the kind of obvious question, or the literal question, as it relates to what Wilma says. How is she going to sweep the house if she loses her arm, if she has one arm? But it's also at a deeper level about the parameters we set for women within our societies in the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. And the title is kind of asking, well, if you're a woman who's not particularly inclined to function within these parameters, or if the parameters are not such that you would be able to thrive, if you are disadvantaged in some way, disinclined to comply and do the done thing or to conform, how do you thrive in that environment? How do you thrive? And the book explores that. And I hope that when, you know, when people get to the end of the book, there's the understanding that, you know, there is no thriving for certain women within that context, within those parameters. So having said all that, I had written the prologue. It wasn't the prologue at that point in time. That was changed closer to the end. But that little myth was in the novel. And I remember reading it and thinking, you know, how's she gonna sweep it? How's she gonna sweep it? And it just kind of popped into my head that, you know, the title should be How She Sweeps It. How does the one-armed sister sweep her house? You know, because that really is what the story is exploring. I wish I could say it wasn't that I sort of like took the title necessarily from a line in the book or anything like that, but it just, when Wilma asked the question and I read it and thought, well, that's what the title should be. It just seemed perfect, but it just kind of popped into my head. But that's what it means for me.
And so with that being said, was there a particular message that you had for your readers? Or was there something in particular you were trying to get across to them? Or was it kind of just take it as it comes?
The first thing that I would say about that is that I never start writing anything by setting out to give a message. That's not how it works for me. So, you know, it's always a fascinating process to even go through interactions like this and have people, it really is a blessing because, you know, to have people sort of share with me what they got from the book actually helps and develops me somehow. It's really interesting for me. I don't sit down and say, I want to write a book about domestic violence, or I want to write a book about love, or about a hair braider on the beach, or anything like that. Like I said, I receive the story and I develop it, you know, I develop it from there. So, I mean, there are themes that come out in the book that I think would evolve or develop naturally from my own interests. But it isn't a case of me sitting down and saying, okay, I want to work on this particular theme or that theme. That's not how it goes.
Okay.
So, you know, in terms of, having said that, in terms of a message, I think what I'm hoping to do more than give a message is present a mirror. So I am hoping that people read this book, recognize certain things in it, and that it causes an internal process of questioning, you know, is this true of the society in which I live? If it is true, is it ideal? Is it productive? Like, how could this lead? How is this not good for me personally, and not good for Barbados or the society in which I live as a whole? And how can I contribute to changing that? But it's not about me kind of preaching and saying, this needs to change and this is how you need to change it. That's not what I'm doing. I am just hoping that I'm holding up a mirror and people say, actually, yeah, no, that's true. That is kind of what happens in Barbados, or I have seen this happen in my family before. Should this happen? Like, is there an alternative? Like, maybe it encourages people to think in that way.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So one of the questions we got here is, can you explain how you went about finding a publisher? Lots of us as Bajans have ideas to write, but we don't know where to even go to find a publisher or a distributor.
That's another really good question. So this is this is one of my personal myths, or, you know, one of the myths that I like to get rid of through my own personal experience. That's a better way to express it. So I have been looking for an international publisher probably for about 20 years. Right? And when I say that, not specifically for this manuscript, but being published internationally was always an objective of mine. And what I had to do, a lot of research to find out how the publishing industry works, because, you know, at the beginning, I might have been one of those people who thought, well, I can just write my manuscript and send it to a publisher, find a publisher and send it. And, you know, they'll accept me and they'll publish the book and it'll be a bestseller. And I'll just, you know, that's what I'll do. And it doesn't work that way. So I had to, and there are tons of websites about this. There are writers' magazines. There is the Writers and Artists Yearbook. There's so much information out there. It just takes a little wading through. So for this, I'll talk about this particular process. Essentially what I did was, I took the first step, which was trying to find an agent. In order to find an agent, I researched writers, international writers whose work I felt was similar to mine. When I say similar, I mean in terms of a different worldview, a voice from a non-traditional part of the world when it comes to international publishing, a tendency to like to write as much with what isn't said on the page as with what is actually said, you know, a lot of exploration of emotional landscapes as opposed to physical description, things like that. So I looked for writers that I felt shared those characteristics. And then I researched who their agents were. Then I would have looked for the submission guidelines of those agents online. And usually they're all the same, which is you submit a query letter. There is a whole science to submitting a query letter. There is a whole science. There'll be tons of articles on the web just about how to do a query letter. But anyway, I submitted a query letter with the first 30 pages of the manuscript. And then I waited for one of the 3 agents that I approached to get back to me. 2 of them did. And they requested a full manuscript. So I sent the entire thing. And, you know, luckily for me, my agent now actually got back to me and said, well, you know, I want to have a discussion about this. And I swore that was it. That was publication. My work was finished. You know, we were going to have this discussion and she was going to offer me representation. It didn't happen like that. We had a discussion. She wanted some tweaks made. Anyway, I made the tweaks, sent it back to her when it was finished, and she offered me representation. That was step 1. She then submits to the publishers. Writers generally for what we call legacy publishers or the traditional publishing houses will not deal directly with authors. So she would have then submitted to the editors at a number of publishing houses, gotten back to her to express their interest in publishing the manuscript. So that was the process of getting a publisher.
Wow. I mean, I hope that answers the question, because I would have never guessed that it's that whole big process.
Yeah, it is that involved, yes.
And how long did it take before you got that response back?
Okay, so you mean from the time when my agent submitted it, or?
So I guess for both. So how long did it take for an agent to get back to you and then for the publishers to get back to the agent?
So the whole process between sending out the partial manuscript and getting a request for a full and then having my agent review it was probably about 3 to 4 months. From the time, and then I had to make the changes, that was probably about another 2 months. From the time she submitted to the editors at the publishing houses and they got back to us was actually quite short. She sent out on the Thursday, and by the Monday she had people calling her, because the Monday she called me at work. So that part of the process was actually quite short. But prior to that, you know, sending the partial manuscript, the query letter and so on, and, you know, actually getting representation, I would say probably about 4 to 6 months.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So a really good question we got here from D. Gibbs. Do you think your time living abroad allowed you to have a better appreciation and understanding of your Barbadian heritage and hence made you a better storyteller? That's a really good question. I guess a real good question I have to
So yes, the short answer is yes, because I have found that whenever I have gone overseas or over and away, as we would say, to live, whether it's to study or just to work or whatever, like I kind of hinted at that before. I think home just becomes this really sharp picture in my mind. It's like once I'm outside of it, it's so much easier to observe it in a dispassionate way, to look at it for what it really is. I remember, living in London at that particular point in time. I think it was in winter too, and just being so homesick. And this is a girl that home in Barbados. I mean, I love the sea, I love the beach, but maybe, twice every 6 weeks, I'll go to the beach, maybe. and not if I'm really busy. I remember this particular occasion, I was just sitting down and daydreaming about the beach, Miami Beach. Oh, remember that time when I went to Browns? What the water looked like and what the sand looked like and how the trees were. And, it was just like, it just goes into really, really sharp relief in my mind. I think also when you're away from home, you understand a lot better how we differ as Bajans from other people. And, having to adjust to a different way of living can be fairly traumatic as well. It certainly was for me at points. But I think that, yes, it allowed me to appreciate home a lot more. It also allowed me to be a little bit, not even a little bit, it allowed me to be brutally honest about some of the realities of home, things that were not so good and things that were great. So yes, definitely.
It's interesting that you said, you have to kind of get accustomed, but like you live in Barbados, and so often I talk to my family and stuff, and they're like, yeah, we just go to the beach, every now. I'm like, how can you go once in a while? I'm over here.
Exactly.
The weather is bipolar. One day I'm wearing a jacket, the next day I'm bike riding. You don't know what to expect, but I can appreciate that. It makes you appreciate Barbados that much more, right?
Exactly. So much so, like it was kind of, I remember that time when we came home, I swear we were so tired, 8-hour flight, we went straight to the beach. We got home, changed, and went to the beach. That's like, for me, that normally home in Barbados, the beach is there, whatever, I can go. I love the sea. I think I have a special thing about the sea. I would say that from as young as I remember being in my dad's arms and being walked along Harry Smith Beach, because we lived really close to there at the time. And I've always had this special thing for the sea, special relationship with the sea. But as I got older, it didn't extend to having to be there every couple days or anything. Until I went overseas and had to live without it.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was something else. Then it was another story.
I could imagine. Now, this is a good question. It came in as an anonymous one, but I thought it was a really good question. So did you receive any negative comments from some in the Bajan community who thought that perhaps this book may portray Barbados in too much of a negative light with all the violence and, the incidents that occurred?
That's a good one too. I actually did not have negative comments about that. I have had people ask me if I've received negative comments, but I haven't actually gotten negative comments. Now, the thing for me in writing this book, we have this saying, tourism is our business. That's what we say in Barbados. I remember that slogan for I don't know how long. It's kind of like burned in your brain. Tourism is our business, let's play our part. I think with this novel, because of the story that I was telling, it was important to me that Barbados did not have to just be the beautiful, picture perfect postcard paradise. Okay. We are that. We know that we are beautiful, you know, sort of I live where you vacation type of thing. And, you know, it's these wonderful sunsets and all of that, we have that here. But Barbados is a country and a nation like any other country or nation in the world. And therefore you have the good aspects and you have the bad. This happens to be, or when I say the bad, let me put bad in inverted commas and good in inverted commas, actually. Let me put them both. Barbados is a complex place, like any other country or place is a complex place. It just so happens that in this particular story, that is what I'm exploring, you know? So it really was important to me for this novel that Barbados did not have to be the beauty queen of the Caribbean. It could just be. It could have its not so great moments. It could have its ugly face. It could have, you know, that kind of thing. It could just be complex. It could just have different sides. And I think the story for these particular characters, the main characters in this novel, their version of Barbados is not going to be the picture perfect paradise, even if it is as simple as taking that aspect of Barbados for granted, as I would admit that I do from time to time. Maybe, you know, we see it every day, so it's less of a big thing. We don't perhaps appreciate how blessed we are every day. Okay, so yes, and I'm guilty of that as well. But it could be as simple as that, and it could be as much as, you know, I'm here struggling on the beach trying to eke out a living, and you want to tell me lay down in a hammock, have a fruit punch, and look at the sunset. You know, for these characters, it would be like, really? Like, you know, so I haven't received bad comments. People have asked me if I have, but I haven't actually received bad comments. And, you know, that in itself says a lot. I would challenge anybody who's read the novel to show me the that they consider bad. And then when they're able to point those out to me, to demonstrate to me that they're not true.
Fair enough.
That would be important.
Fair enough. Now, this question came in a few times. I have it here from Lynn and it's also from Anonymous. Would you like to see your book on the big screen? And has anyone approached you about that yet?
I have had some approaches about the book being on screen. I've had some of the people who've interviewed me and who've read the book for the interviews have said, you know, this needs to be a movie. So I've had that, and I've had a couple of people actually approach me and say, look, I'm interested in buying film rights or whatever. I have directed them to my agents, but nothing has come out of that so far. So watch this space maybe in future, but yeah, my agency really would deal with that, and they will let me know if they think that they have a good deal.
Okay, yeah. Fair enough. So I know our time is getting down there rather quickly, and I was hoping to not bring up the topic of COVID at all, but there is a question here from FF, and it says, will you be doing any in-person book tour maybe sometime later this year?
Yes, actually, I do have actually just recently. I've had a number of invitations to do in-person events. So, you know, I will be doing that. Right now, they are based overseas. I'm really hoping that at some point in the near future, I'll be able to do an in-person event in Barbados. To me, it's, you know, I love technology and all that it has allowed us to do in COVID conditions, or under the restraints that COVID has presented. but there's nothing like being in a room with people and talking about your book and feeling that energy and so on. It's really, it's unparalleled. I really enjoy that. So I'm looking forward to doing it. None scheduled at the moment for Barbados, but I know that there are some events scheduled for June, July, and August outside of Barbados. So we'll see.
Ooh, okay. All right. I like that. So this one, I like this question. Again, it came in from an anonymous person, but it says here, I'm curious about the tunnels. Where are they? I know there were tunnels by the garrison.
So the thing is, this is where we get to my poetic license, because are a bit of a mix. So they're inspired by the tunnels by the garrison. I remember, and again, this is something, when I first started writing this story, when it was a short story, tunnels weren't in there at all. Caves weren't in there at all. A couple things just started to happen, just in my life, just experiences I had. So for example, one day I was driving along the garrison with my daughter, Zaya, and I passed George Washington House, and I had toured George Washington House before with her. And I said, I read this thing in the newspaper about these tunnels underground that they've now opened to the public. Let me just drive in and see if they're there. And I did that. And I had this excellent tour guide. I mean, up to now, I remember we visited there the other day again, and we spoke to him, and he took us through. He was so knowledgeable. And it just excited my imagination to try to think about, what these tunnels were like back in the day, the times that he spoke of. But one of the things that struck me about the history that he was able to share was that a lot of it was based on, George Washington House and the history of George Washington House and the soldiers who would have been based at the garrison and so on. There wasn't anything about the little Black Bajan boy in that community who might have known those tunnels were there and wanted to sneak and explore and maybe did. That perspective was kind of missing. And I remember doing the tour and just being so excited by the possibility of being able to write a Bajan, a Black Bajan, into that story of the tunnel. So there was that was the first inspiration. Second one wasn't so nice. Several years ago, there was a tragedy in Britain's Hill, I think it was Britain's Hill, where an entire apartment building fell. And I think one of the things that had been said, I remember reading in the newspaper, somebody had said, well, we always knew these caves were under here, and there's like almost like a network of them and what have you, but we never thought something like this would happen. And I just started to put things together in my mind. So it is partially the tunnels at the garrison and partially the whole idea that we have, as part of our topography in Barbados, we do have these caves, and it's a network. So there have to be tunnels that link the cave or pathways or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I kind of put those two things together in my mind, and voila, the tunnels in the novel. So it's based on more than one thing.
Okay. So we are getting down there in time. And I understand, I don't know, a little birdie told me that you might have news to share with us.
I have news. Oh, yes, actually, just today the book was, it was announced that the Women's Prize for Fiction in the UK, the shortlist has been announced, and How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House is on the shortlist of 6 books. Yes, going for the prize. So that's a pretty prestigious writing prize in the UK, and it awards works of fiction from women all over the world. And I think they would have started with 144 books, if I'm not mistaken. That was whittled down to a long list of 16. and then a short list of 6. So that was announced today.
Wow.
Yes, my Instagram has been just going crazy, but I am really excited about that. So yes, that just today that was announced.
Congratulations.
Thank
I'm
you.
sure that everyone who is watching are clapping and giving you a round of applause.
Thank you.
So other than this big news here, what's next for Cherie Jones?
Right now, I am working on 2 writing projects. One is another novel. It's set on a cocoa plantation in Trinidad, mid-19th century, and it's narrated by an 8-year-old girl. The working title is Nib. That's actually her name. So nib has a double meaning. If you look it up, it's like the very pointy part of the pen that puts the ink on the paper is the nib, but it's also the name for little bits of cocoa. Like, yeah. So it's set on a cocoa plantation, and there's this little girl called Nib, and she's telling this particular story. So that's the novel that I'm working on right now, that my agent wishes I would hurry up and get finished. Just putting that in there. But also I've been working on flash fiction a lot. So flash fiction would be short stories, very short stories, 300 words or less, a fully formed story in 300 words or less. And I'm working on a collection right now. I've published flash fiction stories and entered them in competitions from time to time over a period of time, and had some that did, pretty well. So I'm trying to put together a collection that's based on parts of the body, and that one is called Body Parts. So yeah, that's what I'm working on.
I wanted to squeeze this one in just because you spoke about, the next book kind of being based in Trinidad. Do you think that that is something that you're going to stick with, kind of having the West Indies as like, your setting for most of your books, or you think it's kind of sky is the limit, or?
Well, this is the thing, because, I go where the spirit leads, as we like to say. So it really depends on the story that I've received. So I know, sometimes when I'm saying that, I think, oh Lord, people now going to think, well, she's not too right in the head, or hearing voices, and but so really, I can't say right now whether that will or won't be something that is a feature of my work from this point on. I will say that I've written things in the past that are not so much focused or based in the Caribbean, and even the same flash fiction stories. I find a lot of my flash fiction is almost like magical realism. It's very, I've written flash fiction stories. One of my favorites is about a woman who woke up one morning and realized that her breast had run away. I've had stories where, a hand just appears through a wall, and it's about how the characters kind of relate to that. I've had stories where a woman goes on a date with a wolf. So they're, and those, aren't based in Barbados. They are some of them that, that Bajan aspects come forward. It could be in the way that people speak. I do have one where Bussa gets down off the, the Bussa statue basically comes to life, and he walks down Broad Street. And that has some interesting consequences. So, but it's that type of thing. So I can't say that will be the defining characteristic going forward, but certainly it has been a big feature of my work up to this point. I can't, I can't, nor would I want to escape where I'm from. So that's my lens, and a lot of things are going to reflect that. So I'm fine with that.
I would like to hear that Bussa one though. I would really like to hear what he thinks about what's
That's all I can tell you. There's Bussa, and there's this girl in a yellow dress, and Bussa is walking down the road, dusting off the plaster and the dust and whatever off his feet. But yeah, when it's done, I can let you know.
Okay, all right. That's a me and you thing. That's a me and you thing.
Right, that's fine. That's fine. No problem at all.
So before we get to wrapping up, can you tell me 3 things that most people don't know about Cherie? Put you on the spot.
Oh wow, 3 things that people don't know about Cherie. The first one I think would be that I once operated a stall in Camden Market in London. My sister and I, when we lived there, yes, we had a stall in Camden Market selling jewelry that we made ourselves.
Love it.
So, I think that's something that a lot of people would not know about me. 2 more things that people would not know about me. What? Oh, wow. My absolute favorite music is reggae. And when I say reggae, I mean like what we would call old dibby dub. That is my favorite type of music. I don't think a lot of people know that about me. I could probably sing, the lyrics to most old dub songs that you could call it. That's my thing. I really love dub, dance hall, reggae, that type of music. I like all types of music, but I got a special place in my heart for that. Yeah, that's true. And then the third thing is, I think I am a pretty mean cook. I love cooking. I don't get to do as much of it now as I used to before, but I think if I had the opportunity maybe to go in that direction, I think I would seriously consider becoming a chef because I love it that much. So, yeah.
So, I haven't been to Barbados in a while, but does that mean that then we can link up? I can get a little cooked food. You can tell me about the buses story and listen to anytime. Look, whenever you're ready, just come through. We can do that. We can definitely do that. Well, Cherie, the time is dwindling down. Is there anything you would like to leave the people with?
No, I think I just want to thank everybody for the support. Thank the missions in North America for organizing this event again. Like I keep saying, things have been crazy for me since probably about January or February when the book actually came out, and all of the international attention it's been great, but really, like I say, what means the most to me is that my people really understand and appreciate it. So I'm really thankful to the missions for organizing, to you for being here. I'm pretty accessible, I think, on social media. So if anybody wants to talk to me, just check me on Instagram at Cherie Jones Wright, Cherie Jones Wright. Facebook, same thing, at Cherie Jones Wright. And on Twitter at CSAJ the Writer. So usually I like talking to people. I like hearing what you thought about the book. I like sharing information about my writing. And that's probably about it. Thanks to everybody for their interest, and thanks for buying the book and supporting the book and recommending it to your friends. And I just also want people to look out for some of the fantastic Bajan writers who are about to hit it. Listen, I'm telling you, the New York Times bestseller list needs to watch out. They got some Bajan writers right now that I think are just gonna blow up. There's Shakira Bourne. I think everybody knows Shakira. There's Sharma Taylor. There's Heather Barker. There's Linda Dean, we know her for a while, and Esther Phillips, but they're all doing some fantastic work. And Lisa Springer, of course, Lisa, who's based in the USA, but she's been my writing buddy for a while. So the people that I've just mentioned, for the most part, have agents. They've already passed that first rung, and some of them already have publishing deals. So I think there's going to be a takeover pretty soon. So you can watch out for that. Caribbean writing and Bajan writing to the world.
Bajans do it best, man. Bajans do it best. So for those of you who have not got your copy yet, if you're in the US, you can get it at Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Nobles. Many independent bookstores will also have it. And then most airports, so example like Hudson News. If you're in the UK, it's Waterstones. Again, most independent bookstores and Amazon. Here in Canada, you can get it on Indigo, Amazon, and again, the independents. And then for Barbados, it's Black Rock Books. I believe that they have sold out and there's a new order coming in now, which is amazing. That's a good problem to have. And then if you are an audio and ebook reader, of course, Apple Store, Amazon, and Google Play. Did I get all of them listed?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Thank you very much.
So if you have not been able to maybe listen to the entire question and answer, or if you want to tell a friend to watch it on the Facebook sites, you can find this recording as well. So it'd be Embassy of Barbados in Washington, Consul General of Barbados, Miami, Consulate General of Barbados in Toronto, the one in Miami as well, and then the High Commission of Barbados in Ottawa. So just look up those Facebook pages and you'll find it. Now, I would like to thank the Missions of Barbados in North America for putting on this event and allowing me the opportunity to be a part of it. Thank you, Cherie, for taking the time to talk to me. I feel like I was catching up with a girlfriend. It was really, really fun, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yes, I did.
And thank you to the lovely audience for welcoming Cherie and I and DPS into your homes and your hearts. Now, please sit tight for a little bit longer because we do have a social worker PSA. But for myself, to all of you, thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night, stay safe, and Godspeed.
Domestic violence is no one's national hero. United Nations reports that domestic violence leads to more than 30,000 deaths per year. Centers of Disease Control and Prevention estimates that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will experience physical violence by their intimate partner. 5 million acts of domestic violence per year among women 18 years and older, with 3 million involving men. Domestic violence destroys families, destroys communities, destroys workplaces, individuals like us, whereby one person tries to exert power and control over another. But what really, really hurts is its impact it has on children and youth in the same household. Today, Miss Cherie Jones, the Barbados Association of Professional Social Workers, thanks you for your penmanship and the pages we now have to turn on this issue. We also thank the Barbados Missions in North America, advocates too against domestic violence. And to you, the victims, it's time to speak up and speak out. And to you, the perpetrators, it is time that you be a hero and stop the acts of violence.
Through all my travels, I've realized an island is only as big as its heart. And in my time in Barbados, I've seen the heart of the island, even through the people, through the food, even through the rum. The way we travel has completely changed, but it's the best feeling to know that peace of mind is right within our reach. But I can tell you, my experience here has been so seamless. The guy who's my taxi driver, his name is Big Apple. He has true Bayesian spirit. He's welcomed me into this island, and he's given me the most authentic experience. When it comes to Bayesian food, I am obsessed with breadfruit cuckoo.
This has no business tasting this good.
So I got to try breadfruit cuckoo for the first time on Peg Farm. I had a really good time going to check out the rum tours. If you are a fan of rum punch or just rum cocktails in general, you're going to have a really good time on that tour. And Barbados, if you do not know, has incredible water. They've got some amazing underwater shipwrecks. The turtles here are beautiful and they literally are so friendly. This island has big stories to tell and big moments for you to capture. So when you're ready to reimagine the way you explore, Barbados is open and so is its heart.
Come from a place, we accept every single race. Paradise is we name. Come over and you will fall in love. I should stay, have a special time of the year where we just get away. Most beautiful display. Go search a million places, travel a million miles to find a vibe like this and have a time like this. You may have a million problems, need some place to ease your mind. Welcome to my place, oh yeah. With arms wide open. This place here is the sweetest place. My culture, you can eat arms wide open. Promise you'll never be the same. Show you how we done celebrate. Jump all around us, all with us. Let all around us, all with us. All on the ground, that's all.
Barbados is a beautiful island in the Caribbean that represents many things for many people. It is the perfect holiday getaway, a foodie paradise, the birthplace of rum, and the home of Rihanna. Welcome to Barbados.